James, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. I really appreciate it. Um,
Not at all. It's a pleasure.
Honestly, One Life is an incredible film. It is simply stunning, it's so beautiful. How did you come to be involved?
I sort of grew up with a history of making films based on real lives, real events, um, TV movies. Um, I'd worked with the company Cecil Films, the producers of King's Speech, Lion, Power of the Dog, and I'd worked with them recently on a TV project, and they had this script that they'd been working on for over a decade. Um, and they sent it to me, and there was just no question in my mind. I read the script. I clicked into that celebrated YouTube link back to the TV show, a little bit of television history, and I wanted to try and make that movie.
It's an incredible story. It really is one of these remarkable. I want to say untold, but it isn't untold. I know that it isn't, but I was one that I was not familiar with. Um, what what strikes you about Nicholas Winton that makes him so special? I mean, I know he's passed away, but um,
Well, there's a list of things. I mean, in many ways, it's that he was so ordinary.
yeah.
In some ways, that it was so humble and understated. I mean, this man spent his life trying to give and do and be charitable. In that first moment, he saw a problem, he saw children in danger, and he felt he had to try and do something. He was moved to act. It was 9 months of his life. He then went on to be an ambulance driver in occupied Europe. He trained pilots. He was involved in the reparations after the war, trying to return property that had been seized by the Nazis from Jews and see if it could be given back, it could be traced. So he spent years there involved in trying to put right the wrongs that had been created in that time. Um, uh, and just to remind us, this this man was a stockbroker. He was a banker. He had no special skills in these areas. He just felt the need to try and be decent and do the right thing.
Well, then this comes out in the film. There's a conversation. They're sitting around the dinner table, and you have a lot of faith in ordinary people. I do because I'm an ordinary person. Um,
Mm.
and you said yourself, like he was so ordinary. And I guess the question I have is, why is it that the average ordinary person feels like this is so extraordinary? I mean, why? And it is an extraordinary story. I don't mean to take away from the story, but it feels like this is something that is impossible to do.
Well, I think because we are overwhelmed by what it would mean.
Mm,
Um, I, I suspect also most of us, the vast majority of us, are not very good at giving up the time and energy to do the sort of things he did. I also think it's because we'll see, and this is true to most people, we'll see all the reasons why it can't possibly work, or that it's not my problem.
mm.
And I worry that's without wanting to get too heavy. That's a case today that we're a lot more occupied in ourselves and our own crises, and a little bit less willing to look around us.
And that's interesting, the whole "not my problem" statement you make there, because I think you're absolutely right. I think so often we look at the hurting and the broken and say, well, it's not, at least it's not me. And
Mm.
that's not what's happening here.
And it came at a cost. It came at a cost to him, as you see in the film as well, or I hope comes through. That we then meet the older Nicky, who has been spending 5 decades of his life um, with some sort of grief and regret. And his grief and regret is that he didn't do more.
Mm.
What the film tells you, of course, without wanting to be a spoiler, is there's a catharsis, there's a reward, there's a redemption at the end of it that is distinctly feel good. But you meet the man who's still struggling with the fact that he feels he should have done more.
Which is staggering. I mean, it's amazing, and I mean, in the film we see him, and he's such, I'm sure he was a very humble man, but he doesn't want to talk
Mm.
about himself, and he sees the 669 as important, but he sees the ones that he didn't,
Yeah,
all the ones that didn't make it, and the weight on his shoulders. Um,
yeah.
but within the film as well, one of the comments that's made is "Save one life, save the world." And I
Yes.
wondered on your thoughts on that particular comment and what that means.
Well, as you probably know, it's of Hebrew origins. It's a text that goes back to the Talmud. Someone will correct me, and I think depending on the translation, it save one life, save the world entire.
Mm.
And this idea that, and again, it's a very good analogy to today. It's very easy to be overwhelmed by the problems that we face and to go, well, it's just too big for any one individual to sort it. The saying encourages us to just do that little bit you can. And you'll be amazed by the changes. You just look at the maths in Nicholas Winton's case. He saved 669 kids. It's estimated that because of that, over 6,000 people are alive today.
Wow.
That's a pretty extraordinary return on human maths.
It's unbelievable, really.
Yeah.
Um, and it, it's interesting because the thing about this film that I find so striking is it still feels current. This is one of those
Mhm.
films that takes place in 1987 and 1937, 38, I think it is,
39.
39.
Yeah.
And yet feels like it could take place today. I was
Yeah.
wondering in your mind what we can learn from Nicholas Winton then that we can apply to today.
Well, it's a bit frightening, really. Look, very early on in the process of making this film, I was in Prague with the essential team, the producer, the cameraman, the designer, and we were scouting for locations. And we were down at the central railway station where there is a statue to Nicholas Winton. And we were just taking our snaps of the statue when suddenly the whole atmosphere in the station changed.
Hmm.
And there's kids crying, and there's police, and there's radio chatter. And we suddenly realized there's this big crowd of people arriving, and they were newly arrived refugees from Ukraine, from the war. And of course, it begs the question, what would Nicky have said? What would Nicky have thought? And we know that he felt that actually we're very bad at learning from history.
Hmm.
We are very short-termist as humans, as society. Um, I, I want us to learn better. I want us to look at our past and go, look what we've got wrong. How can we possibly do this all over again? And yet we do it again and again. What do we learn? Try and be decent. Try and do the good thing. That sounds like I'm preaching. It sounds like a Sunday school lesson. That's what Nicky would say.
But I think that that's appropriate. I think that's an appropriate thing to say. I mean, it's that's not about preaching. I think that's the genuine spirit of this film. Like you said, he's a man,
Yeah,
he's a stockbroker, and he sees a problem and he wants to help. And that's really the
yeah,
only qualification he has.
yeah, yeah, utterly.
Honestly, it's such a beautiful piece. How did I know I wanted to ask you about well, both men do a wonderful job, but Anthony, how did Anthony come to be involved?
When Nicholas Winton's daughter handed over the rights to the production company Seesaw, she said, "Well, I've just got one proviso. You have to get Anthony Hopkins to play my father," which is a pretty big ask of any producers. There was then a process. She actually wrote a letter directly to Anthony, um, which in a way encouraged him because there's always a little bit of trepidation about taking on a true character and am I the right person to take this role? He read into the story, he did his research. He's a great one for spending time with the script, reading it literally dozens of times, looking at any material there is of the real life person. He did all those things. And then I went to meet him. We were due to have a short breakfast. It was an hour and a half slot. 4 hours later, we were still talking, and we had a take on what we thought together the film and the role should be. And the rest is what you now see on screens.
It's another wonderful performance for him. I mean, I know he always does a great job, but this is such a wonderful story, um, and as I said, speaks to today. And I appreciate the power of the ordinary means a lot. James, thank you so much for your time, and I congratulations on it. I wish you the best.
Thank you very much. Pleasure speaking to you.
Pleasure speaking to you too. Have a great day.